Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. A major rule change has been proposed in Formula 1 that would possibly derail Red Bull's intention of continuing their dominance for too much longer. Multiple teams want a new idea implemented which is rather similar to an idea Lewis Hamilton mentioned a couple of months ago, preventing teams from developing next year's car before a certain date during the previous season. This would potentially mean Red Bull could no longer use their massive advantage to carry over to next year's development earlier than other cars, and especially should entirely reset the playing field come 2026. Very much intrigued your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. This is Daniel Ricciardo getting ready. Well, actually, it's an old picture, but you know what I mean. Getting ready for this weekend's Austin Grand Prix. This is going to be the Haas livery. They're doing like a special American themed thing. I don't know if what they're trying to do here is say like, oh, Andretti, you say you're the American team. Let's not forget, like, you know, we're kind of American and we're good, right? And well, who knows? They're going to bring an upgrade here as well. So Haas, I think, are going all in on like, no, we're the American team. We don't need Andretti. It's fine with just us. I'm sure they don't want Andretti to come in and steal the spotlight in some respect. So they're bringing an update here to Austin. They've got the special livery. We'll see if they go well. There is a sprint race, and we know that this car can qualify quite well. It's the race where they just fall off a cliff, unfortunately. This as well was confirmed that Disney Plus are producing, and we heard rumours about this a while ago, this Keanu Reeves presented 4-part documentary series on the Brawn GP famous story during 2009 when it was meant to be Honda, then it was Brawn GP run by Ross Brawn, then it of course became Mercedes after winning the Constructors and the Drivers title with Jenson Button. So yeah, if you guys are fans of either Formula 1, Jenson Button, Keanu Reeves, there's not too much more to like about this than what they are proposing. So yeah, looks pretty cool. Hopefully it goes down a treat. November the 15th is when that is going to be launching. This weekend then, loads of upgrades. Mercedes are bringing a fair few bits. We'll see that in a second, especially a new floor. But AlphaTauri, they apparently are bringing upgrades basically every race. They are committing to the long haul, bringing a lot of things to their car. And apparently this will follow Red Bull's direction, as in fairness every team is. But AlphaTauri are closely connected with Red Bull, and there's been various rumours as to whether they're going to take absolutely everything they can from Red Bull, i.e. what has to from Ferrari, or whether they're going to still design some of their own parts. The belief is they're going to optimise collaboration in all areas, and certainly next year take more parts than they presently do. It's very clear they're going to be very closely associated next year with Red Bull, because apparently they are going to take those logo colours again on the bodywork and under the identity, so it's very much going to be back to kind of Toro Rosso days. Now, it's not going to be called Toro Rosso, it's probably going to be called something related to Adidas or something related to Hugo Boss. Those are the two brands that have been linked to take over the name there, but probably there's going to be Red Bull colours, and it's going to be much closer to a Red Bull design than this past AlphaTauri has been, which is pretty concerning for the opposition, given the fact that AlphaTauri the last 2 years haven't been great, but in theory, if they do take a lot of things from Red Bull, they could be a very competitive midfield team, knowing how good the Red Bull is. Haas will hope to try and match them. This weekend is actually massive for Haas because they've put big time into these Red Bull-inspired updates on the side pods, actually, so we'll see what they look like, trying to improve their car. Gunther Steiner has said if these upgrades don't work, their 2025, or their 2024, sorry, is compromised by the amount of time they've put into these changes. So it needs to work for Haas. We'll see if it does. It's the same story for Mercedes. They're bringing a new floor in Austin. James Allison says it's not going to be massive in terms of time delta. They're really looking forward to seeing whether the car actually takes them a step forward in understanding and stuff like that. Will give us a bit of a gain, but above all, it will help us understand if we are on the right path for 2024. They've said this before, but in fairness, it wasn't James Allison saying this before, it was Mike Elliott, and James Allison was brought back at the start of this season because they were struggling without him, to be honest. Now, he also went on to say that the next 6 months of development, as Hamilton said, are massively important. This is not just for next year's 2024 car, but also for 2025. The key reason being, all of these teams already are turning their attention to 2026. That is pretty much the biggest overhaul we've had in the sport since 2014, the new 2026 regs. Brand new aero regulations, Probably still ground effect in part, but there's going to be like active aerodynamics returning. The cars are going to be smaller, loads of other aero changes, but also brand new engines. So that is the big reset that the teams are looking for in 2026. Red Bull are currently dominating here in these current set of regulations. We expect their advantage to continue certainly into next year, 2025, who knows, but there's no doubt that in 2025, lots of the focus will be on 2026, and that's what AMUS report here in a second, that basically this car, the W15, and all of the other cars around the grid for next year, 2024, is almost exactly what's going to be there in 2025. You can't do it again. You can't create a brand new concept from scratch again. Whatever is the car next year is going to pretty much be the concept for the car the year after, because all of the resources at that point will not go into developing the W16 throughout the season. It will go into developing the W17 for the start of the new era. And it's the same for all of the teams. So this is what James Allison says. It's highly likely that the 2025 cars will be close cousins of the 2024 cars. We have heard rumors there might be a couple of regulation tweaks to try and stop the dirty air, but realistically it's still the same set of regulations. And well, then as he goes on to say, the driver usually gets in the car right at the start of the season and basically tells you you can spend your bonus that you're going to get or you can't, i.e. this car's good, this car's bad. And as he says, like, pretty much if the car is good, it's born good, and you can tell right at the start. But fundamentally, it's massively important for Mercedes to get the 2024 car correct, and all the other teams feel the same way. The key reason why this is interesting, though, is because Red Bull currently have the advantage. That advantage is expected to be maintained. But for 2026, how early can they develop the 2026 car? There's already rumours as to the aero regulations that might be around. It might not be long before these teams can theoretically start putting pen to paper on the 2026 cars. So if you're Red Bull and you've got the best car now and next year, and the 2025 cars are pretty much a cousin as well, you might think, you know what, let's just get a head start on 2026 while the other teams are still trying to beat us in 2024, 2025. A lot of teams, probably not Red Bull, but we'll debate the pros and cons of this for Red Bull in a second, are pushing for a rule change that will not allow aero development for the 2026 cars before January 2025. So this is on AMUS, and when AMUS say something, there is usually a very good chance that it's pretty much bang on the money. So this is what they go on to say: massive regulation changes in 2026. James Allison says the cards are completely reshuffled. Everything that happened before no longer counts. Everybody starts with a blank sheet of paper, and therefore lots of talk about, well, 2026 is so important because of the budget constraint as well. That's really what I'm getting at earlier, is that nowadays there's a budget cap in place. You can't develop 2025 from January to December or whatever and not compromise your development in 2026, and therefore the teams probably won't do anything during 2025. And I know that they're also saying in the article that if you're a fan of upgrades, 2025 is not going to be a fun season, because pretty much the cars that exist at the start of the year are going to be the cars that end the year, because everyone's money and focus will be on next year. But what about in 2024? Let's say Red Bull start out next season with another dominant RB20 and they're still winning every race by 30 seconds. They might say, you know what, we're going to win the next 2 years easily, and we're going to basically do a Vettel 2013. So why not just focus on 2026 now? And that's the thing, like if you're Verstappen or Red Bull or even another team and they're winning most things during 2025, this is what happened in 2013 when all the other teams were focused so much on 2014's overhaul in aero and in engine regulations that nobody tried to catch Red Bull, and Vettel won 9 races in a row. So the end of 2025 could be spectacular if the teams actually are on a similar level, or could be underwhelming because no one's going to try and catch up the best team, which is where this might help Red Bull, because if the teams at that time have to switch their focus, which they will in January 2025 based on these rumours, Red Bull until that point can keep developing their current car and could probably maintain their advantage. But in 2026, it will be a completely blank slate. As AMUS go on to say, a rule change is intended to prevent some teams from fully starting development in 2024 and making an early start. In recent weeks, the technical directors have discussed in their technical working group TAC meetings that the 2026 aerodynamic development in the wind tunnel and CFD simulations must not start before January 2025. There is apparently a majority in favour of this solution, but it has to be confirmed again next time around, that should then only be a formality. So this is very interesting because let's not forget, it's all rather similar to what Hamilton suggested a couple of months ago, and a lot of people said, oh no, this is outrageous, don't know what Hamilton's talking about, there's no way you could actually do that. Hamilton's suggestion was there should be a date, such as October the 1st or August the 1st or something, at which point that is when you can start developing next year's car. Before then you can't. This is what Mercedes used for years when they were winning the championship quite comfortably. They would start developing the year after's car much before anybody else could, because they were still trying to catch Mercedes, and Mercedes were getting a head start next year to continue the trend of dominance. Red Bull are now doing the same thing, and Hamilton said, look, I talked about this when we were doing it, and it was a problem then, and it's still a problem now, because dominant teams just, they can carry their advantage year on year, as Red Bull are currently doing. There's no secret, Red Bull haven't really been developing the RB19 at all for quite some time. All of their focus is on the RB20, and it's probably going to be another rocket ship, let's be honest. So Hamilton said, what if we put a date in place when you can't develop before then? The reality is, this is incredibly difficult to actually do when the regulations are similar. Like going from 2023 to 24 or 24 to 25, the cars are basically very similar. How do you police what is done on that next generation or what is not done, especially when so many of the things are going to carry over? Who's to stop people thinking up ideas in their heads? It's very difficult to execute what Hamilton is saying, but if there is a major overhaul in regulations, it probably is possible to say, all right, guys, you're not allowed to do any work, at least in wind tunnel and CFD testing or anything like that, before a certain date, which is what a majority of teams now want to be the case. So who does this help? Who does this hurt? It probably helps Red Bull for the next couple of years, because it means that, all right, we can't do anything until Jan 2025 on these new cars, so I guess they need to focus on their current car, which means that probably if next year goes as we expect it to, they're probably going to have the best car for the next couple of years. But I think what people are really hoping is that at least in 2026, they can't also get a head start on aero and therefore maintain some level of advantage. It's still going to be ground effect. There's still probably going to be some things that are relevant, but it is going to be entirely different. So 2026, therefore, this you'd think hurts Red Bull, because if they are the best team in 2025, they won't be able to carry any of that advantage over. So more than likely, this is Red Bull, I'm not sure, will be happy about this, and most of the other teams probably will, and if there's a majority, it's probably going to go through. So, seems like a change that probably makes sense, to be honest, in all parties, because if you allow the teams to start developing whenever, then, some teams might write off 2 whole seasons to try and get it right in 2026, which probably not what we want. So, sensible if they can actually police it, and that's the thing. How do you make sure that the teams aren't doing anything on the new regulations before that date, which, maybe it's doable, given the cars are so different. It should be able to be tracked and audited as they do with the budget cap. But yeah, with the budget cap in place, if this is true, the entirety of 2025 will just be work on 2026. I mean, you got to think, Jan 2025 is before the 2025 season even begins. So, it's quite possible that the 2025 cars nothing will really happen, because everything behind the scenes will be on the 2026 cars that everybody's trying to get right to quite possibly try to dethrone Red Bull. So, very much intrigued to your thoughts on that in the comments section below. Which team will get it right at the time? And it will be exciting to see, because it should be, as we're seeing, a complete blank slate. That's not to say that Red Bull and Mercedes and Ferrari shouldn't still have the strongest technical teams, but it should be a complete reset in the team's thinking going into 2026. So Aston Martin, they could be competitive. Who knows about McLaren at the time? Audi as well will be looking to be good when they come into the sport. So all sorts of possibilities. And just a couple of things to close out the video with. Firstly, I thought this is interesting, the race put together. This is points from sprint races all time. So since sprint races came in, these are the points accrued. Only one team has never scored a point in a sprint. So even Haas have scored 7 points. I think a fair few of those were Austria, to be fair, because they do quite well there. But there's never been a sprint race in Austin, Texas before. There will be this weekend, and AlphaTauri will try and score some points here for the first time ever. They might be in with a chance of doing so if their car is upgraded, as we might well expect it to be. And of course, Danny Rick is back in the car. Just feel kind of bad for Danny Rick because he was getting roasted by Jacques Villeneuve, actually, who basically said that I like Fernando Alonso and admire him because he's hungry, and that's the difference that a great driver makes. I want, drivers to drive for the passion. I would ask kids who want to be drivers today, do you want to do it out of passion, or do you want to be like Daniel Ricciardo, smiling in commercials? So look, Danny Rick smiles in commercials, but he doesn't make him necessarily a bad driver. I think that he can smile in commercials and be a good driver at the same time. So yeah, say about that what you will, but very much interested to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.